comfort and distractions of today collide to indulge our desires and provide a slow death by apathy. A superior primitive ethos exists. Prepare for tomorrow. Defend what you value and lead those you love. This mindset is the foundation of living an authentic life as a bold, disciplined man resolute in your mission. Prepare, defend, lead. Your mission. Own it.
My name is Joe Prim, and I am the host of Prepare.Defend.Lead. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If not, thanks for coming back. If you enjoy this podcast, there are a couple things that you can do to help push this mission forward. Number one, subscribe. That way you don't miss an episode. Share with your friends, enemies, and anybody that you think could be helped by these episodes. And number three, leave a review. That review that you leave may just be the difference between somebody checking out this podcast and enjoying it and coming along for the ride over the duration, or somebody that passes right on by. And as this opens up into the episode 6 here, as a little bonus thank you for leaving a review. If you leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast, and you direct message me and let me know about that on either Instagram or on Facebook at Prepare.Defend.Lead, I will send you a sticker, a Prepare.Defend.Lead sticker, as a thank you for helping move this mission forward. We got a new website up. I talked with my buddy James over at the I Am Liberty podcast this last Wednesday, and he said it was great. He really liked the new website. It's much simplified and very straight to the point. There's a button on the front there so you can get quick access to the episodes right off of Spreaker. And also, if you would like to support this mission, there are some options there as well. We got t-shirts up. I think I got 6 or 7 different designs, a little bit of something for everybody. We got the Always Forward shirt, as well as the Parabellum, if you want peace, prepare for war shirt. A new design up. Remember the Alamo. Check out the t-shirts there. Or if you like coffee, that's more your jam. We got 6 different types of coffee up there on the website. Everything from Zero Dark 30, a real dark brew, to the decaf. We don't need no stinking decaffeinated coffee. You can go right to preparedefendlead.com. Check all that stuff out. That makes a big difference between keeping this podcast moving forward, between growing this mission, and things slowly just petering out. It's a lot of work and a lot of effort to put out this podcast each week. It's not just the podcast, not just the recording time. It's all the little extra things that go along with it. So those who have made purchases from the store so far, you know who you are. I really appreciate it. The names that came up on the list were longtime listeners, people that went back to Ever Vigilant and have been supporting this podcast for a long time. Thanks, guys. I really do appreciate it. I saw who put in the orders. It makes a big difference. Thanks. I do really, really appreciate it. And that money is going right back into this podcast, into advertising, into paying for Spreaker, into paying for keeping this going forward. We've got to build some momentum here as this podcast is just getting off the ground, and we'll keep it going forward. Plenty of big plans in the works for what's going on here. As time has gone on and I've realized and learned what is going on here, what it takes to have a successful podcast along with a business, you really have to go big or go home. There's really not a lot of room for playing it safe. And if you want to play that game that way, your reach is really limited. And I think the message of Prepare, Defend, Lead, I think the mission here, your mission, right? Own it, is huge. And I think we could make a big impact around this country if we could get men off of the couch and get them focusing on preparing for tomorrow, defending the things that they value, and leading those that they love. If we could get men focused on those three things, amongst others, we could make a tremendous impact. So thanks again to those who have left reviews. Thanks again to those who have made purchases and the website already. I do appreciate it very much. So in this episode, as I've talked about in the past, I want to attack things from a different angle. So many of the different topics that we talk about in this world always start to sound very, very similar. We go at things at the same angle. We look at things the same way. Maybe we've looked at them for a long time. So I want to try to look at things just a little bit different and maybe open up our eyes to some different possibilities, some different solutions, some different ways of looking at things to prevent us from not seeing the forest for the trees. So I honestly have no idea how long this episode will last. I got some notes here, and I guess it will depend on how crazy I get in depth into what I'm thinking about here. So I wanted to do an episode on preparedness. This is obviously a big part of what this podcast is about. And I always have difficulty knowing where other people are at, where my level of education should be. Should it be in giving out lists of what you should have in your everyday trauma kit that you carry? Should it be lists of essential extra food items that you have around your house? Should it be lists of what people might need or should have stocked up if they live in an area with where hurricanes are a threat, or blizzards are a threat, or tornadoes are a threat? So if some of you guys out there are maybe in the beginning stages of preparedness and don't know anything of where to start and are overwhelmed, let me know. And I can gear some episodes towards that or have guests on that can help in that area. If people have other questions, maybe deeper questions into generators or into heating without electric or into cooking without when the electricity is out, or other things of that nature, and you want to get a little bit more deep into it, let me know. And maybe I can do some separate episodes a little bit deeper into some of these things. But for this episode, I kind of want to focus more on the mental side of preparedness. I think it's something that's often overlooked, and we fall way too easily into going to the stores and making purchases, or going to Amazon and making some purchases in order to make ourselves feel more confident in the position that we're in. And while gear and gadgets are great in their place, we have to realize that there are people living in war-torn areas around the globe, and people that are living in remote regions around the globe that have never seen, let alone even heard of some of the ridiculous things that those that are into prepping talk about on a regular basis. These are people that understand the idea of survival mindset, that understand the idea of the soft skills versus hard skills. So For some people, as the world has shifted in 2020, as this paradigm shift happened in the beginning of this year with COVID and Pandora's box was opened, a lot of people are in a strange spot where they're questioning things that they never questioned before, where they're looking at things in a much different light than they ever looked at before. Because Candyland, the Candyland that we live in, the world of having whatever we need, whenever we need it, the way that we want it, looks like it's starting to crumble a little bit. You know, I was joking in an episode a while back about us losing possibly our right, as some people would look at it, to buy toilet paper at the store. And as I got to thinking about it, I mentioned a couple episodes ago that toilet paper is probably the most undervalued luxury item of modern times. Because we've grown accustomed to these things. These are just things that we expect. And when we expect certain things, when we don't have them, or have never pondered or ever thought about not having them, those things take us by surprise. And when we get taken by surprise, we get put in a very dangerous situation. The more we know what to expect, right? That's why we use blinkers when we're driving in traffic. So somebody ahead of me turns on their blinker for a right turn, a half a block ahead or a block ahead of that turn, I know, I can anticipate what they're going to do. I can anticipate that they're going to slow down to make that turn. And in fact, sometimes you throw yourself off because somebody slows down a lot earlier than you expect, or somebody slows it down a lot more than you expect, and you come a lot closer just because we start to become accustomed to different things in our life going the way that they have always gone before. So let me start with my list. List number 1. We can fight fear with knowledge. Fear is a killer. Fear will put you in one of the worst spots that you can possibly be. And more so even than fear is worry. Fear has its place because there are times where we really should be fearful. And that's what courage is. That's overcoming the fear to do what you need to do. So fear can be our friend, but we cannot let fear put us in a position, or worry put us in a position, where we can't do what needs to be done. We go back to, again, talking about this year in 2020 and some of the chaos and the craziness that's gone on. And for me, none of this stuff has been surprising. None of this stuff has been a shock. None of this stuff has thrown me off whatsoever. In fact, these are things that I have been contemplating and thinking about and debating and reading about and listening to books about and having conversations about for years. And this is what knowledge does to help you combat fear. Everybody's afraid of losing their job or afraid of the unknown. But the more that you explore that unknown, the more that you walk yourself down that path of the unknown and start to look at what the possibilities might be or could be or should be as you go down that path, the more comfortable you will become with going down that path. So a lot of people will have a lot to say about prepper fiction, right? Stories of the apocalypse and stories of economic doom and stories of this and that. And while some of them may go off in an extreme direction in one way or another, for me, they served a great purpose as I started out down the path of preparedness. Because they gave me ideas They gave me things to think about. They gave me a story for me to have in my mind of different types of possibilities, of different directions that things could go, of possibilities that had never crossed my mind before were now there for me to ponder, to think about, to plan for, to prepare for. So, if you are just starting out in preparedness, well, we'll go through this list and you'll get a little bit better idea of the caution. But at the same time, it's a good way, if you're just getting into this, to understand and gain some kind of concept of different stories, even though they're fiction, of possibilities of directions things could go. And when you start to go down these paths, when you start to see different possibilities and walk them through, you'll become just a little bit more comfortable, just a little bit less fearful, because now it's not the unknown. You have an idea of some possibilities. So number one, fight fear with knowledge. And this goes for knowledge of hard skills and soft skills, right? So the knowledge that you can walk through these fiction books and have a little bit better idea of, a little bit better understanding of possibilities. But the more knowledge you have in gardening, the more knowledge you have in water collection, the more knowledge you have in the soft skills like building relationships, building rapport with your neighbors, the better position that you will be in. Number two, focus on the most likely emergencies for your area. This is especially for those just starting out who are looking for a focus, are looking for a direction on where to go with preparedness, and for those that have been doing this for a long time that just need that reminder that if we focus on the most likely emergencies, if you live in an area with tornadoes, focus on things that you would need for tornadoes. Or if you live in an area where there's blizzards, focus on that. When we were in Illinois on the homestead, that was probably, tornadoes were there, but one of my biggest concerns, one of my biggest fears was a blizzard, was the electricity going out for an extended period of time during the winter, and how we would operate on the homestead, how we would keep water for the livestock, how we would keep ourselves warm, how we would cook, how we would light things up, how we would take care of things in that situation. Because of the short days, even things such as keeping the house lit become a challenge. So over an extended period of time, we're talking about a major challenge, especially in some regions where you rely on electricity for your heat. All of these little things like this, or if you live in an area of hurricanes, it's really amazing to me that people that live in areas that year after year are threatened by hurricanes never seem to have water stocked up. Something as simple as stocking up on buying an extra $2.50 case of water each time you go to the store, just to toss in the garage, just to start stacking up in the garage for an emergency. But every time there's a hurricane, there's issues with getting fresh water to those areas. And you have to think about the fact that not only would it be great to be able to be sure that your family had enough water, if you bought an extra case or 2 or 3 or 4 a month over a year period, you would have enough water to share with some neighbors as well. And that would be a great position to be in, to be able to not be needing the help, but also be able to be in a position to be giving out aid. So focus on your most likely emergency situations for your area. Maybe in some areas, even with all the forest fires that have been happening over the last few years, making sure during forest fire season that you have that bag by the door already packed. So if you get that knock on that door, or you get that emergency call, that you can be out the door very, very, very quickly should the wind shift. Number 3, get to know your neighbors. This one is really, really a rough one for some people. For most of us don't mind watching some YouTube videos or listening to some audio books or some podcasts on preparedness, but get to know your neighbors, yeah, that's a rough one. But it's important. It is important. In difficult times, we all need people that we can rely on. Out there at the homestead, we had some great neighbors. And although we were the new people in the area, and you got a little bit of the cold shoulder from some people, some of those farmers had lived there for several generations, so being the new people that were doing something new in their region was not always smiled upon. But we had some great neighbors that helped us out in some difficult situations with the equipment that they had. We didn't have big tractors. We didn't have equipment for hauling around firewood or for plowing our driveway. And without asking, many times they would stop by and chip in and give us a hand. Having relationships with your neighbors is priceless. The other part of that, and this even goes out even a little bit to being in rural areas in this whole idea with preparedness, is so many people have a real desire to become self-sufficient. There's this real push, there's this real desire to be self-sufficient. And having spent 4 years, a little over 4 years out on our homestead in Illinois, I really started to realize more and more and more what a pipe dream that was, and the amount of work that would need to go into being completely self-sufficient. And then you start to realize, as you look at that possibility and that desire to become self-sufficient, and you realize that throughout history, very, very few families or single people were self-sufficient. The majority of people relied on their tribe. They relied on their neighbors. They relied on their village to supply certain things. And if you can set yourself up with knowing your neighbors, and maybe you supply eggs to them on a weekly basis, and they supply half a cow to you on a yearly basis, or you supply vegetables to somebody and they supply eggs back to you, where you can focus on what you like to do, or what you're good at, or what your land can easily provide, and they can give you back something else, and you can trade, you can barter, you can help one another. That is a much more ideal situation to find yourself in than being totally self-sufficient and having so many responsibilities, having so many things that need to be done on a daily basis that you would find it very difficult to keep up with them all. Number 4, stop fantasizing about it. A lot of people start reading this prepper fiction, start watching videos, start reading books and listening to podcasts, and they start to fantasize about what would happen. What would the big turnover and what would things look like should we turn into a total breakdown of our society situation? And some of these people, because they've spent so much time and energy and efforts prepping, They believe that should this apocalypse come, or should this total breakdown of our society come, that all of a sudden the roles would be reversed. And they would be the ones in power, because they're the ones with the firearms, the ammo, the alcohol to trade, the tobacco to trade, the food, the commodities. They're the ones that have planned, prepared for this. All of a sudden, now they're the ones with the power. And if you're not very careful, that can lead down a very negative path. Because the reality is none of us should be hoping or be desirous of a societal breakdown. The cost would be tremendous. Let me repeat that. The cost would be tremendous. If we were in that situation, all of us would probably end up losing at least someone in our lives that we care deeply for. It should not be something that we fantasize about. It should not be something that we wish for or are hopeful for. It should be something that we would do everything that we can to prevent. But be ready. And number 5, take action. Take action. Get out there and meet your neighbors. Get out there and practice the hard skills. Get out there and do some camping. Get out of your house. Check out the locations that you think you could use for a bug out location. Figure out your game plan. Figure things out, but don't just figure it out on paper. Don't just talk about it. Don't just fantasize about it. Practice these things. Turn them into something fun, but take action. Action is the only way that things get done. You can plan, you can think about, you can talk about, you can read about, you can listen to people talk about anything and everything. But until you yourself take action, until you yourself take the first steps that you deem necessary down your path to become more prepared, it's nothing. It's completely nothingness. So take action. Get out there and take action. A couple of bonus things. Boom. Spices. If you're stocking up on beans and on rice and on other canned goods, make sure that you got some spices in your storage. Make sure that you got some allspice and some chicken bouillon and some beef bouillon and oregano and whatever other types of spices that you want, some garlic salt. This stuff is cheap. It's easy to come by. But if you get stuck eating the same stuff each and every day, variety may be the spice of life, but having some chicken bouillon or some beef bouillon to throw in with your rice or your beans would be priceless. Along with that idea, make sure you buy and toss in your pocket or toss in your storage containers or however you're doing this stuff. Tape it on some cans. Buy some P51s. Those are a little bit bigger version of the World War II GI can openers. And I have one on one of my keychains. And we don't have a can opener right now in our house. My wife's bought a couple of cheap ones and none of them seem to last very long. But that P51, it makes quick work of a can. And you can pick them up dirt cheap on eBay. They are priceless. If you were in a situation where you needed to open up a can of beans for your wife in the kitchen while she's making dinner, while she's trying to make some chili, that P51, priceless. Toothpaste and toothbrushes will round out this idea of some things to make sure you have in your storage. Nobody wants a cavity. Nobody wants toothache. Do what you can to make sure that you have some toothpaste, some toothbrushes, so that you can keep up the best you can on your tooth and mouth hygiene. And that goes with soap too. Soap is dirt cheap. It is so cheap to buy some of those packages with 12 bars of soap. Pick up a couple of those when they're on sale and toss them in with your storage stuff. All right, those are kind of some thoughts on preparedness from the mental side. Now I want to talk a little bit, too, in this episode of our new property down here in Texas. I want to get into a little bit of that piece of property from a preparedness angle, from that direction. We got to spend some time out there this last weekend camping and spent the night out there. The foundation was poured a couple of weeks ago, so it was nice to see the location where the house will be. It's really hard to judge. They sent us out there in this 5-acre parcel and asked us to lay out and show them where we wanted the house to be. And then they measured it out based on where we thought it would be. So I knew as I looked at this plot, on the plat survey of this piece of property, it's very much just a rectangle shape. I wanted the house a little bit more on the west side, because on the east side I want to put in a little barn, and that side have the driveway on it. So I knew I wanted it that direction a little bit more, and I also knew that I wanted it not square, not straight, not parallel to the road, but just cocked just a little bit, so that it would open up the back side of the backyard where we'll have a patio, open that up to the beautiful hills off towards the west and towards opening it up towards the sunset. But all of this seems fine and dandy when you're looking at the plat survey. When you're actually out there in person and you're trying to figure out how much of an angle you want that house to be at, where it works the way that you want, but that it doesn't really look strange, and you're trying to judge where it is located compared to the road out front. I wanted it not too close to the road, but at the same time close enough to where I could see my kids out there riding their bikes, but far enough away to where it's a little bit more private than the house was in Illinois. So all of these things are kind of tough to do on a big parcel of land like that. So once the foundation was poured, now we were able to realistically look at where this house ended up and get a little bit better picture of where we had placed it. And I'm very happy with the end result. Looks cool. I'm happy where it's at. The angle worked out nicely. It's a little bit closer to the west like I had wanted. So I think we did a pretty good job guesstimating where we wanted it and maybe got a little lucky in its placement. So that was fun to go out there, see that the concrete was there, the foundation was poured. I went into a little bit of detail in the last email blast that I sent out last week about the foundation and how different the foundations are here in Texas versus up north where I spent most of my life. But I wanted to get into a few of the key things that kind of made this piece of this parcel in this development a little bit different, and reasons why I am happy with where we ended up. And these are in no particular order. It's gated. To me, this is tremendous. To have a security gate, a big steel gate with steel and stone to keep people out of this development that don't really belong there is a huge, huge upside. while this is a luxury that I never would have imagined myself having, living in a gated community, I'm using the air quotes, this was just a perk of where we ended up living. It's the development needed to have a gate because of the exotic animals that run through it and to keep the cattle from the neighbors out. So I don't think that it was looked upon when they were building the subdivision or building this development as much a luxury thing as a necessity. But for having a coded entry gate in this development, to me, is a huge bonus. Where we were before in Illinois, our house was maybe only 100 feet off of a rural road, but yet a very busy rural road. So for us now to be in a gated community and not just have traffic going through offers a different level of security than I've ever had before. Number 2, it's way off the beaten path. We're not far from a hospital or far from grocery shopping. In fact, we're probably closer to that stuff, or at least just as close, but again, probably closer than we were in Illinois, but we're way off of the beaten path. Down a dirt road, over a couple of cattle gates, and through our gate into this development. So being off the beaten path, being away from normal traffic, people not knowing that the development even exists unless they've been there or lived there, to me is a huge bonus. We will have a private well on our property, which is huge. After we move in, we will look into seeing about getting a solar pump or getting some water collection containers to pump water into for the event that electricity goes out. Maybe look into getting some different sorts of hand pumps or something that could run off of the generator to make sure that even if the electricity goes out, that we would have water during that time. And the other part of that, as far as water, is we do have river access off of our property. Our property is not along the river, which to me is a good thing, one less concern about flooding, but we are close enough to the river that we could get water down there should we need to. Plenty of game to eat. Part of the deal with this development is that they keep their agriculture exemption for taxes by keeping exotic animals on the property. So we pay a maintenance company, or I should say everybody in the development pays a maintenance company to be sure that these animals are fed, that they are healthy and taken care of, as well as managing the roads. So we have all sorts of cool animals that roam around. And when we were there this past weekend camping, we saw more black buck and axis deer and different types of antelope, gemsbok, different types of rams, fallow deer, red stag. So this property, this development that we are in, is very much loaded with all types of game. Of course, there's no hunting allowed in this development, but should an emergency situation arise, with the very few people that are living there at this time, it would present an option to be sure that people are fed. And along with those exotics are a lot of white-tailed deer. So that's been one of the best parts of our experience on this property. Right now, I believe this development is around 650 acres, with the smallest parcels being 5 acres. very, very few people are out there. I believe that the majority of the people that bought their acreage or their parcels bought it to sit on, bought it as an investment. So there's not that many people out there. I believe our house will be the first house completed in this whole development. And every time we go out there, we see a new animal. We see some kind of new breed of deer or antelope or something that you would see in some kind of National Geographic Antarctic Africa episode. So it's been really neat. We're sitting out on the property, sitting around the campfire in the afternoon, and we have fallow deer off within visual to the south, and to the north we had axis deer running across the property as our dog was barking at him. So it's been a great experience, but it's not only a great experience and beautiful to see and great to take pictures of, but should push come to shove and things get bad, it would provide a source of protein for us and anybody else in that development. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it is 5 acres, so it's about twice the size of the piece of property that we had in Illinois. And having had the opportunity to see what could be done, what the possibilities were on 2.5 acres, the idea of 5 acres is kind of ridiculous. The amount that you can even do on an acre with good planning and with setting yourself up in a smart way is pretty ridiculous. So to have 5 acres to plant trees on and fruit bushes and gardens and even have some of our own livestock, maybe some small goats or something, is exciting. And we're looking forward to not only the challenge, but also the opportunity to make the best and make the most of these 5 acres. So we're excited about that, excited about the possibilities. As I've mentioned before, we're not exactly sure what we're going to do, what type of livestock we might have, how we might go about things a little bit differently. We've been discussing a lot of different possibilities as a family, and we'll kind of play it by ear and see what works out best for us. In Illinois there, we ended up with so many different types of animals and so many different things going on that it really got at certain points to be like the animals were running us, that they were running the show versus us them. And that is a rough situation to be in, because for me, throughout life, one thing that I have learned is that being proactive versus reactive puts you in much better control over everything. The more proactive you can be, the less reactive you have to be. And all of a sudden you're playing a completely different ball game. So for that time in Illinois, we were always reactive with the goats. We were always trying to get ourselves in a position where they weren't escaping or we weren't having difficulties with them. And it was a challenge because it was always reactive. We would try to do something proactive. We would change where they were at, or we would change the rotation routine, or we would build different types of fences, or we would do something different, and they would continue to escape the moment they felt like the grass was greener on the other side. So they were very much a challenge. That kind of stuff, I think we'll really think hard about before we allow ourselves to get into those situations again. One thing that we will most definitely do is have chickens, for broiler chickens on chicken tractors. It is a constant topic of conversation every time that my wife makes chicken, that this chicken is just not like the chicken that we used to raise. And the taste is quite different and quite striking, how much more flavor and how much more moist the broilers were that we had raised on our property. But I don't see that not happening just because that's a family-wide issue with store-bought chicken these days. So for this final segment here, I want to talk about something that I've been debating talking about, to be honest with you guys. I mean, really, really debating talking about it. This topic never came up in 4 years of Ever Vigilant and probably will never come up again. So if you are one of the few that listens to this segment, you are in for a treat because this topic will probably never, ever, ever be brought up again as long as I record podcasts. But why it really struck me is I have never had this experience before. I am the guy who never has dreams. My kids always want to tell me about their dreams the next morning, what happened. I usually try to push it off if I can because I do not care to listen to other people's dreams. Probably one of the biggest reasons I don't like to listen to other people's dreams is because I never have dreams. Or in reality, I never remember my dreams, right? I never wake up in the morning remembering a dream. The other night, I laid down early, real early, and woke up hyperventilating over a dream that I had. And I don't want to paint too vivid of a picture for this dream, but the message that came out of this dream was that if you feel there is something that you should do, if you feel there is an opportunity to help somebody, then help them. In my dream, I was riding a bike with my 2 kids up a mountain road. And on our right-hand side, we were going up the right-hand side of this road. There was a guardrail and a cliff down. And as we were riding up, my son started to struggle a little bit, wavering back and forth, and I was within reach, and in my mind I thought for a moment, grab him by the shoulder and steady him. But instead, I thought, he's got it, he can handle it, there's a guardrail there. Moments later, he went over that guardrail and fell down this mountain. Now again, this is a dream. And normally, I don't have dreams. And I certainly don't pay attention to dreams. But the way that I woke up from this dream, it will stick with me, maybe forever. I woke up in a full panic, hyperventilating, with those words imprinted on my mind. If you feel that you should do something, do it. If there is somebody that you can help, help them. So maybe out there, maybe there's somebody listening to this podcast, or maybe there'll be somebody that listens to this podcast 5, 6, 7 years from now. And that message will resonate with them, and that message will mean something to them. So rather than hold that message into myself and keep it in my mind and let it haunt me for the rest of my life, I felt that I would throw it out there to those that listen to this podcast as a reminder that all it takes sometimes is reaching your hand out and steadying somebody's shoulder that could save you from years and years and years of regret. So with that crazy dream, with that crazy story, I'm going to wrap up this episode 6 of Prepare.Defend.Lead podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking around. It is great to be back doing this podcast. It is great to be here. It is great to be a part of this mission to reach out to men, to encourage men, to challenge men to put their minds onto something other than the distractions and apathy that leads to death. If you want to check out another conversation that I had this last week, as I mentioned earlier, I was on the I Am Liberty podcast with my buddy James. We have been friends for several years now. I had been listening to his podcast, the I Am Liberty podcast, for probably a couple years and had just started doing or being more consistent with the Ever Vigilant podcast. And I got a random email from James over at the I Am Liberty podcast and said, "Hey, I really dig what you're doing over there with Ever Vigilant. Would you be interested in having me on your podcast and you could come on my podcast?" And I remember being completely shocked that this guy, who I listened to his podcast but didn't know him from anybody, reached out to me to ask if I would come on his podcast. And from that moment on, we hit it off. And if you want to listen to that episode, it's really just a couple of guys just talking, just rambling, just enjoying having a conversation together. You can check out the podcast from this last week at I Am Liberty Show. He titled that episode Prepare.Defend.Lead, so it should be easy to find. Check that out. Check out preparedness.com. Got t-shirts, got stickers, got coffee over there. Support the podcast, support this mission, support what's going on so that we can move forward and we can get this word out there to those that are blind to what's going on. Thanks again, and as always, hold fast and God bless.